You have breached the walls. You have survived the long march. You have taken the keep. You sit at the high table, surrounded by the lords and commanders of the realm. They raise their goblets to your name. They praise your strategy. They admire the heavy plate you wear. By all external measures, you are a conqueror. You have arrived. But beneath the heavy steel of your breastplate, the chest is tight. The breath is shallow. The tremor takes hold of your hands. You keep them hidden beneath the oak table so the others will not see the metal shake. You look at the banners hanging from the rafters, and a cold, creeping dread settles into the stomach. You are waiting. You are waiting for the heavy wooden doors of the hall to swing open. You are waiting for someone to point a mailed finger at you and declare to the entire assembly that a mistake has been made. You are waiting for them to say that you are not a knight. You are a peasant who has stolen a dead man's armor. In the clinical world, this quiet terror is called imposter syndrome. In the language of the mind, it is the curse of the pretender. It is the crushing psychological belief that your presence in the room is an error, that your victories were not the result of the hammer and the anvil, but of blind luck, a shifting of the wind, a trick of the light. You believe that any day now the visor will be lifted and the world will see the frightened child hiding inside the steel. We must examine why the mind builds this torture chamber for itself. It begins with the nature of identity. The human ego is a map maker. It draws the borders of who you are based on where you have been. If you spent years in the mud, fighting for scraps, the ego draws a map of the mud. It learns the rules of the dirt. It builds your identity around struggle, inadequacy, and the desperate climb. But what happens when you finally climb out of the trench? What happens when you earn the title, the position, the respect? Your physical reality has changed. But the mapmaker is slow. There is a lag in the spirit. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. The mind cannot reconcile the grand hall you are sitting in with the map of the mud it still holds in its hands. Because the ego cannot immediately update your identity to match your new reality, it searches for an excuse. It searches for a reason to explain why a peasant is sitting at the high table. And the easiest explanation the mind can find is fraud. It whispers to you in the dark. You tricked them. You fooled the king. You do not belong here. You only passed the trial because it was easy. You only won the battle because the enemy was weak. Every piece of evidence that proves your competence is discarded. Every word of praise is deflected like an arrow off a shield. You become entirely focused on maintaining the illusion. You work twice as hard, not out of passion, but out of the sheer panicked terror of being discovered. You carry the weight of the stolen steel, and it is exhausting. Look to your left and right. Look at the other commanders sitting at the table. Observe their armor. It is polished. Their posture is rigid. They speak with booming voices and absolute certainty. When you look at them, you see natural-born warriors. You assume they were forged in a different fire. You assume their minds are quiet, their hearts steady. This is the grand illusion of the battlefield. In psychology, there is a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance. It is the false belief that your internal suffering is unique, simply because everyone else is hiding theirs. You compare your internal chaos to their external armor. But you cannot see behind their visors. You cannot hear the racing of their hearts. You do not know that the commander to your left is also gripping the underside of the table, waiting to be exposed. You do not know that the Lord to your right rehearsed his confident speech 100 times in the dark, terrified of stumbling over the words. The truth of the realm is this: no one is born in full plate armor. Every single master was once a fool who dared to pick up a sword. Every general is just a soldier who survived long enough to be handed a map. We are all acting a part until the part becomes who we are. When a squire is knighted, the armor they are given is heavy. It is stiff. It chafes against the skin. They do not yet have the muscle to bear it effortlessly. They feel like an imposter inside the metal. But the solution is not to take the armor off and return to the tunic. The solution is to wear the steel until the shoulders grow broad enough to carry it. If you feel like an imposter, you must reframe the sensation. The tremor is not a signal that you are a fraud. The tremor is a signal that you have crossed the moat. You have left the familiar village of your youth. You have walked out of the comfort of the known, and you have stepped onto a larger battlefield. If you never felt like an imposter, it would mean you are no longer growing. It would mean you are only fighting enemies you already know you can defeat. It would mean you are stagnant. The feeling of being out of your depth is the tax you pay for entering new territory. It is the friction of the ego expanding its borders. Do not run from the friction. Lean into the heavy metal. You cannot wait for the feeling of total confidence to arrive before you act. Confidence is not a prerequisite for the charge. It is the reward you receive after the battle is won. Courage is not the absence of the tremor. Courage is feeling the hands shake, feeling the cold sweat against the back of the neck, hearing the voice that tells you that you are a fraud, and drawing the blade anyway. You earned the scars. You walked the miles. You survived the nights in the freezing rain when others turned back. The armor was not stolen. It was paid for in time, in discipline, and in blood. Stop looking at the door, waiting for the guard to escort you out. No one is coming to remove you from the hall. You are the commander of this keep. Settle into the chair. Breathe the air of the high ground. Accept the weight of the steel. It belongs to you. The march continues.